It's hard to believe that New Orleans, the city that care forgot, didn't really care that much about major pro football when it was first introduced locally back in the 1920s. Of course, over time, that would change and result in one of the greatest fan bases any team could ask for. November 2016 will mark 50 years since the Crescent City was awarded its coveted pro franchise. While it's near impossible to talk about every single detail, today we'll take an extended look back at not just Saints history, but the stories going back 4 decades before then evolving from glimpses of the game to the full-force effort in getting a franchise based here. Welcome to Fleur de Lis Football Flashback. One of the great long-lost stories of New Orleans professional football history occurred when an announcement was made January 3, 1926, that 7 days later, the Chicago Bears, featuring head coach George Halas and star running back Red Grange, would make an appearance in New Orleans to play a group of local ex-college all-stars at Heineman Park as part of the Chicago Bears barnstorming tour. This was a practice during the 1920s and early 30s in the NFL where they would allow their teams to play other NFL or non-NFL teams in exhibition contests as a way to make extra income. The local organizer of the contest was Lester Lautenschlager, who was Tulane's starting quarterback in his senior year of 1925. As soon as his senior season ended, he was named an assistant coach by Tulane's Clark Shaughnessy. However, he was told by Tulane administrators that they didn't want him or anyone connected with the school to be involved with pro football, as they felt at the time the pro game was on the same level as pro wrestling, a pathetic sideshow created as a money grab. Tulane would end up firing Lautenschlager over this contest. Some 5,000 people attended the game, which is well below Heineman Park's estimated capacity at the time of 9,500. The roster for the Southern All-Stars featured a total of only 14 players. That's right, just 14, including Brother Brown of Tulane, Moon Ducote of Auburn, Tommy Ryan of Vanderbilt, and Red Swanson of LSU. A funny story tied into the game is that Lester Lautenschlager was promised $6,000 for his expenses by Charles C. Pyle, the agent of Red Grange, who helped organize the barnstorming tour. The agreement was that Pyle was to put down $3,000 before the game, which he did, but then the other $3,000 had to be put down no later than halftime. When Lautenschlager couldn't find Pyle at the end of the first half, he actually went up into the stands dressed in his football uniform to the press box and told the media there would not be a second half unless Pyle came through with the money. Fortunately, Pyle did so. As for the game itself, the Bears won 14-0. One of their touchdowns was off a blocked punt, which was recovered by Ernie Vick, and then Red Grange would carry the ball in from 7 yards out in the fourth quarter. Grange finished the day with 17 carries for 74 yards. As soon as the game ended, the Bears got on a train and headed straight to San Diego, California for their next exhibition contest. As for Lester Lautenschlager, well, he would go on to practice law for decades in New Orleans, serve as a state representative from 1928 to 32, and then for 23 years was the director of the New Orleans Department of Recreation, which we now call NORD, which was then a voluntary post that paid him $1 per year. The community at the time was very set in their ways and wouldn't embrace a sport whose concept was more foreign than some of the immigrants who now called New Orleans home. However, like a pot of red beans on Monday, sometimes it takes a good long time for something to simmer before it is ready to be enjoyed. Often you hear the stories from the days of segregation of Negro League baseball's dominance with minority fans for the first half of the 20th century. However, in New Orleans, many modern sports fans may not realize the interesting history of what was the Negro Independent Football League that began in the late 1920s. Two of the more familiar teams were the Scrubs and Brutes, who featured players with nicknames such as Rabbit Lawrence, Cocky DeValier, and Tonky Gibson for the Scrubs, while the Brutes featured Baldy Wilson, Tin Can Bora, and Frogleg Tallow. The season ran from September through December, and starting in 1927, a season-ending exhibition contest was established with the annual Times-Picayune Toy and Doll Fund benefit game, where all proceeds went towards poor African-American children's Christmas presents, plus the winning team won a silver football trophy. Some seasons, this game also served as the tiebreaker for deciding the league champion. Most league games were played at either Heineman Park, later called Pelican Stadium, or Xavier University Stadium. The earliest detailed record of a championship game was 1929, when the Scrubs defeated the Southsiders 7-6 on a touchdown run by Mike Morris. The Southsiders' only touchdown was on a 50-yard interception run back by Ernest Wright. The Scrubs went on to win 3 straight city championships, including 1931, where they were unscored upon for the entire season under head coach Ed Brazil. The Elks would be named city champions in 1932, followed by the Brutes in 33 and 34. The 35 title went to the TC Pirates. Those initials stood for Training Center of the Army Service Forces. The deciding contest was versus the Brutes in a 7-2 victory for those Pirates, where the Brutes had a safety via a block punt by lineman Lewis Rousen on Pirates punter Jannard Walker. The winning Pirates points came on a 75-yard touchdown pass from rookie Walker to Howard Gay. A 3-year domination would occur from 1936 to 38 by the Trojans, where the club went undefeated for that entire stretch under head coach Harry Riley in 36 and 37 and Al Johnson in 38. 1938 also marked the first time a postseason game was scheduled called the Chocolate Bowl, which lasted into the 1940s. This contest replaced the Toy and Doll Fund matchup as a potential championship tiebreaker game. Otherwise, it was played as an exhibition contest. In 1939, an All-Star game was created at season's end, where that year's champion would play the All-Stars of the other teams, and this contest would be called the Coffee Bowl. The 1939 season featured a significant milestone, as for the first time a local team, in this case the TC Pirates, played an out-of-state team in the Chicago Brown Bombers at Pelican Stadium in a 34-19 Chicago win. Some 1,000 people attended at 95 cents each. As a reflection of the time, the promotion stated that a large section of the stadium would be reserved for white spectators. One of the more interesting storylines of the league belonged to Al Parker, who was a player for the Elks in the early 30s and later a player head coach of the Southsiders in the late 30s. He apparently once booted a punt 70 yards in a game, in addition to being an accomplished fullback. The 1939 title belonged to the Brutes under head coach Emile Labatt, with the Trojans winning it all in 1940, 44, and 47. The Hawks were champions in 1941, the Scrubs in 42 and 43. The Camp Plauché squad won the 1945 title, with the Southsiders winning it all in 1946, and the Elks dominating the title scene from 1948 through 50. And the Brutes wound up regaining the title in 1951. Often during the league's history, they would also play exhibition contests versus the main Baton Rouge powerhouse called the Regal Patriots, as well as a squad called the Bogalusa 11. As the 1950s progressed, the league would gradually fade away as the times were changing, especially with dwindling local sports attendance, primarily with the Pelicans baseball team, and in addition to changes in the social landscape. It was definitely a different era of sports, but hopefully one that won't be completely forgotten. February 12th, 1934. The local newspapers broke news that another NFL exhibition contest was returning to the Crescent City, as Loyola University would host this event on the upcoming Sunday, the 18th, involving the Chicago Bears, who previously visited the city 8 years earlier with their famed owner and head coach George Halas, plus star player Harold Red Grange, to take on once again a group of former college players. This time, they were scheduled to be led by former Notre Dame quarterback Chuck Jaschwitz, who was recruited for the contest by the team's head coach Bill Daly, who had previously coached Loyola from 1926 to 1931. This contest served as a fundraiser for the New Orleans chapter of the Knights of Columbus's Orphans Outing Fund and was organized by local KC chairman Bernie Greenwood in conjunction with Bears business manager Joe O'Connor, who also organized this version of a barnstorming tour, where a few days earlier Chicago had defeated a similar group of former college players in San Francisco by the score of 7-0. And that event was also reported to be a benefit for the Knights of Columbus there. The biggest local star player to be part of the former Collegians was Bucky Moore, the Dixie Flyer, a native of Macomb, Mississippi, who was recognized as the greatest player in the history of Loyola University of New Orleans during their heyday in the 1920s and early 30s. And just like many of his contemporaries, was a multi-purpose player, serving as defensive back, halfback, and quarterback. He also briefly played in the NFL in the early 30s. Coach Daly also added other former Loyola University players, including running back Arnold Lopez and halfback Joe Tetlow. Both assisted Loyola on the gridiron in recent years. The Bears were very much a powerhouse during this time period, having won the first ever scheduled NFL championship game 2 months earlier. Their roster included future Pro Football Hall of Famers Red Grange, Bronco Nagurski, tackles Link Lineman and George Musso, and end Bill Hewitt. Unlike the locally played contest involving the Bears some 8 years earlier, this contest did not have a lot of events held in the days leading up to it due to Bears' rather tight travel schedule. Game day arrived, February 18th, 1934.
In what was described as adverse weather conditions, likely ahead of a cold front, to which there was debate before the game about delaying the contest until Monday night. Instead, it went ahead as scheduled with what was considered a disappointing crowd, between 2,500 and 3,000 attendees paying 75 cents to $1.50 per ticket. The 1926 event drew some 5,000 spectators. Red Grange would only play in the first quarter and threw a touchdown pass to Bill Hewitt. Nagurski only played sparingly. For all intents and purposes, the game was so out of hand by the end of the first half that the third and fourth quarters were cut in length. The most noteworthy strength of the local former Collegians team was on kickoff returns, highlighted by a Bucky Moore 50-yard return in the second quarter. Moore was also the game's starting quarterback for the Collegians. The local squad's only touchdown came in the fourth quarter on a 14-yard lateral from Moore to Joe Tetlow, with Moore drop-kicking the extra point that followed. The Chicago Bears had 6 total touchdowns, which included 2 each by Bill Hewitt and halfback Gene Ronzani, in addition to fullback Jack Manders having a rushing touchdown and throwing one of Ronzani's TD catches. Plus, Manders also kicked 2 successful extra points, with George Musso running in 1 PAT. The other Bears touchdown was scored by Cliff Battles. At the time, he was under contract with the Boston Redskins, later called the Washington Redskins, as well as the Commanders. League rules at the time allowed any franchises who were playing postseason exhibition games that followed the championship game to sign players to fill roster spots if any of their contracted players couldn't attend due to other obligations. This policy included signing players that were under contract with other teams as long as said players' teams were not participating in their own postseason exhibition contest. Battles and Ed Kawhi, who was center for the St. Louis Gunners, were 2 Bears signees under this policy. The final score in the contest, Bears 39, former Collegians 7. An interesting note involving the officials for the game. Only 4 were used. 3 were locals. Referee Leo Ernst of Warren Easton High School, umpire Werner Luschinger of Tulane University, and head linesman Johnny Lynch of Holy Cross High School. But the field judge wound up being Chuck Dashwich of Notre Dame, who was projected to play quarterback initially, but when it was decided that Bucky Moore would be the starter, Dashwich was more needed as an official, hence his role. It seemed like Bucky Moore's name was heard a lot in the New Orleans area during the course of 1934. Besides him participating in the previously mentioned contest, his name surfaced a few months earlier, specifically on November 14, 1933, where S.A. Godman of Memphis, Tennessee, who had been involved in a small pro football team in his area, announced the formation of the American Football League, no relation to the same league of 1960, which would start play in the latter part of the next year. On April the 4th of 1934, New Orleans is announced as one of the AFL's 11 possible franchise cities, and Bucky Moore is reported to be heading a group to acquire that coveted team and serve as its coach and majority owner. Some 3 weeks later, it is disclosed that Moore has until June 1st of 34 to organize the team and put a deposit down, speculated to be around $1,000, in order to secure it. For some 3 months to follow, very little word was mentioned about the possible franchise, when on August 14th it is learned that New Orleans would not be part of the AFL of 1934, as the financial goal was not met. As a result, it was announced that Bucky Moore would become the head coach of the Louisville, Kentucky Bourbons. The club wound up going 5-3 and finish in 3rd place in what would be the 1934 version of the AFL's only year of existence.
Back in mid-October of 1938, Pittsburgh Steelers owner Art Rooney, whose team was called the Pirates until 1940, got NFL permission to move the team's upcoming home game versus the Cleveland Rams to the end of the season, which was early December, and relocate the contest, all because of low attendance. After negotiations with Chattanooga, Tennessee failed, a friend recommended he speak with New Orleans officials on the availability of City Park Stadium. On November 27th, Pirates business manager John Mayer arrived in New Orleans to present the check to secure the facility. Outside of the local newspapers, Rooney had a tough time promoting the game, which he stated was moved because of an extended snowstorm. One case in point was when he spoke to New Orleans Mayor Robert Maestri. The mayor thought Pittsburgh was a team that was going to play LSU. But nonetheless, word got out, and the following Sunday, December 4th at 2:15 p.m., some 7,500 people paid between $1 and $2.50 to watch Pittsburgh, coached by Johnny Blood McNally, and the Cleveland Rams, coached by Art Lewis, in the very first NFL regular season game played in the southern United States. The Rams dominated most of the contest, starting with a 48-yard touchdown pass from left halfback Bob Snyder to end Jim Benton in the first quarter. In the third quarter, Rams tackle Jack Robinson blocked a Byron Whizzer White punt, which led to another Snyder to Benton touchdown pass, this time from 6 yards out. Pittsburgh prevented the shutout thanks to a Whizzer White 46-yard run, which led to a touchdown pass from White to end Wilbur Sortet on the game's last play. The final score, Rams 13, Pittsburgh 7. In the fumble-free contest, White averaged 6 yards per carry, and Pittsburgh threw 6 interceptions, 3 caught by Rams defensive back Jules Alphonse, plus had 40 yards in penalties compared to the Rams' 5. Rams' Bob Snyder averaged an incredible 49 yards per punt in the contest. Pittsburgh finished the season 2-9, the Rams 4-7. The NFL used only 4 officials in the game. The head referee, Tommy Hewitt, was brought in by the league, and in a common money-saving practice in those days with neutral site games, the remaining 3 were local men. Umpire Leo Ernst from Warren Eastern High School, linesman W.J. Dutch Luksinger from Tulane and longtime Fort J. High School coach, and Bill Walmsley from Rugby Academy. This game's end also marked a brief football retirement for Whizzer White, as he would temporarily leave the NFL to study under a Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford University and later became a United States Supreme Court Justice. While Major Pro Football wouldn't return to the Crescent City for another 11 years and wouldn't become a yearly staple until the Saints in 1967, it's good to know that when you consider how big the National Football League would become, the first game that counted in the southern U.S. was played right here in New Orleans. And then along came 1939. The Southern Baseball Association, of which the New Orleans Pelicans was a longtime member, has a meeting in Memphis, Tennessee, where some of its teams agree to field franchises in a Southern Pro Football League. New Orleans is represented at the meeting by W.B. Wisdom and Seymour Weiss. However, the New Orleans franchise winds up not panning out of concerns by Wisdom and Weiss as to whether or not the pro football franchise would be able to sustain itself financially. Rumors began circulating in September 1944 that New Orleans may get a franchise in the inaugural All-American Football Conference, which originally was scheduled to start in the fall of 45, but wound up not doing so till 46 over a concern of lack of quality players that were out during World War II military duty. Then on December 15, 1945, the item newspaper's Hap Glaude reported an authoritative New York source stated a group of local businessmen had put down $20,000 for the 10th franchise in the league after a meeting with Commissioner Jim Crowley. City Park Stadium would be their home venue, and most games would be played on Saturday nights. Plus, the group was already searching for a big-time coach, according to Glaude's article. About a month later, the news changed to where 2 local groups were actually interested in the franchise and would be willing to play games in the middle of the week as not to conflict with high school or college action. Further changing news came when the league announced later in January of 46 it was only going to have 8 teams and New Orleans wouldn't be included. Faint hope resurfaced in December of 46 when New Orleans was reported to be one of a handful of cities to be the new location of the Miami Seahawks, but that franchise wound up being purchased by a businessman in Baltimore, where it became the Colts. Another attempt at NFL action in the Crescent City came about in an exhibition contest, which was announced on May 21, 1949 by local group Sports Incorporated, led by President Dave Gertler, Director Herbert Palais, and publicity man Scoop Kennedy. The contest was played at City Park Stadium on September 3rd between the Philadelphia Eagles, the 1948 NFL champions, and the Detroit Lions. The Eagles were coached by Earl Greasy Neal and featured running back Steve Van Buren of LSU fame, along with end Pete Fijos and all-star center linebacker Chuck Bednarik. The Lions were coached by Bo McMillan and featured star running back Bullet Bill Dudley. On game day, the crowd was only 12,000 people. Some blamed it on inclement weather as well as the Labor Day holiday. The Eagles won 45-14. Steve Van Buren wound up with 130 rushing yards on the day. An unreported story at the time that wrapped around the game dealt with the Lions' 3 African-American players, Bob Mann, Mel Grooms, and Wally Triplett. Coach McMillan met with the players and informed them that not only could they not stay at the team hotel, but that the city had a prohibition on interracial sporting events and that McMillan didn't think he should break it. Mann would later say in an interview, "If I can't play in the game, I don't want to sit on the bench." He had a chance to be a hero, step up to the plate, but he didn't do it. The game itself was not a huge windfall for the promoters, and their hope to make pro football exhibition games an annual event in New Orleans had to be shelved. On November 23, 1955, the San Diego Union newspaper reports that Redskins owner George Preston Marshall predicts Sugar Bowl Stadium, or Tulane Stadium, will eventually become the home of the annual NFL Championship game and be played on January 1st, replacing the Sugar Bowl contest, based on the feeling it was getting cull, or less quality college teams due to other bowl games having conference tie-ins taking better teams, and the Midwinter Sports Association, the Sugar Bowl organizers, would lean towards the NFL out of concern their sponsors would leave over the subpar college teams. At the following NFL winter meetings, the idea of this neutral site championship game in New Orleans or any other city is not discussed. And yet another brief glimmer of possible exhibition football returning to New Orleans came on June 10th, 1956, when Detroit Lions president Edwin Anderson and general manager Nick Kerbaway announced they would like to play a preseason game in New Orleans for 1957 against the Redskins, but only if it can be played at Tulane Stadium. Tulane's board votes against it over some members not wanting the pro venue in their facility. Then a story develops on February 25th, 1957, that New Orleans is a possible location for a franchise in the upstart United States Football League, no relation to the 1980s league of the same name. Mayor Chet Morrison sends a telegram to league president Millard P. Lang, stating in part, quote, "It is my opinion that our metropolitan area could support a first-class professional football program. Our City Park Stadium is flood-lighted for night play and seating capacity of approximately 30,000. Sugar Bowl Stadium, which seats 85,000, does not permit Sunday play." But you can guess it was the same old story. This potential league winds up not panning out. 1959 was a very disappointing year for many New Orleans sports fans as the Baseball Pelicans, the city's minor league club for 77 seasons, elected to cease operations. Stemming from the shutdown came a new direction as Jack DeFee, the Pelicans' last front office president, decided to start Louisiana Professional Sports Incorporated, formerly known as New Orleans Professional Sports Incorporated. DeFee, along with Jack Salino and Norville Alexander, came together and decided to experiment with hosting the first of what would hopefully be several major pro football exhibition games in the city as a way to gauge the chances of landing a pro franchise one day. They held a formal announcement at the Prince Regal Room on May 4th, 1960, stating the first contest would be held on August 13th that year at City Park Stadium for an 8 p.m. kickoff. The Pittsburgh Steelers, led by coach Buddy Parker and quarterback Bobby Lane, took on the Green Bay Packers, led by second-year head coach Vince Lombardi. After a 6-6 halftime score, Green Bay broke the game open in the third quarter with an 80-yard drive led by quarterback Lamar McCann, capped off by a 22-yard touchdown pass to Tulane's Max McGee to make it 13-6. 20-6 later in the contest, as Paul Hornung would throw a touchdown pass to Boyd Dowler, Pittsburgh would close out the scoring with a John Henry Johnson rush. Final score, Steelers losing to Green Bay 20-13. Some 16,500 fans attended, a figure that Mr. DeFee later told the papers was a bit disappointing, hoping for at least 20,000. About a year later, on August 8, 1961, the promoters told the Times-Picayune's Bob Rossler that they gave up trying to stage a game for that season only because of pressure by an African-American organization over the then segregated seating arrangements of City Park Stadium. A situation would be rectified some months later. On August 18, 1962, the Boston Patriots, featuring Tulane offensive lineman Tony Sardisco, and the Houston Oilers, featuring the great running back Billy Cannon of LSU and Heisman Trophy fame, met at City Park Stadium before an overflow crowd of 31,000 people. Houston would win the contest 20-10. It was the largest crowd to watch an AFL preseason game at that time. One day after the contest, Times-Picayune writer Bill Keefe stated that the citizens needed to rally for a new stadium in order to support a future team. At this point, Dave Dixon gradually took over the lead from Jack DeFee in getting a team here, and Dixon, who earlier that year spent $25,000 on an application fee for an AFL expansion franchise, almost got the Raiders to move here, but two of his minority investors in buying the team backed out on him. Later, the Dallas Texans considered moving here, but Tulane Stadium didn't want to lift its ban on alcohol sales, in addition to being reluctant to open its stadium on Sundays. However, in March of 1963, Dixon finally got permission from the Tulane board to play a professional football game at their stadium, largely thanks to backing from his friend and board member Darwin Fenner. With Dave Dixon now given the green light to use Tulane Stadium, he formally announced on March 30th of 1963 that indeed a special version of the pro game was coming to New Orleans. Over 51,000 fans turned out at the first ever integrated seating event at Tulane Stadium on September 7, 1963 for a very rare NFL doubleheader exhibition contest. The Cowboys, led by head coach Tom Landry and quarterbacks Don Meredith and Eddie LeBaron, beat the Lions, head coached by George Wilson and quarterback by Milt Plum, in the opener 27-17, with all of Dallas's touchdowns being scored by little-known running back Amos Marsh. But most fans present likely remember the more than 2.5-inch rainstorm that started with 8 minutes left in the game and lasted some 45 minutes. The second contest between the Bears and Colts was delayed by 50 minutes to clear water from the sidelines. The Bears, led by New Orleans natives Richie Pettibone and Rosie Taylor, won the contest 14-7. One of the biggest complaints that night was charging $5 a ticket for end zone seats. The second game didn't end until 12:05 a.m. Sunday morning, which technically meant it was the first time Sunday football was played at Tulane Stadium. August 8, 1964, some 60,000-plus fans filled Tulane Stadium to watch the St. Louis Cardinals, featuring former LSU star Jerry Stovall, take on another LSU star in Jim Taylor and the Green Bay Packers. The Cardinals upset the Packers 20-7, ending Green Bay's 24-game preseason winning streak versus NFL teams. Local promoter Dave Dixon was so excited he immediately sent telegrams to all NFL and AFL owners to urge expansion at their next meetings. He also bought several thousand bus passes leading into the game so that fans wouldn't have to worry about all the parking issues around Tulane Stadium. Then on September 5 of 64, some 38,000 fans watched the Bears beat the Cowboys 21-6, with New Orleans natives Richie Pettibone and Rosie Taylor each getting an interception in the contest, plus future Saint Dave Witzel ran back a blocked field goal 56 yards for a touchdown. After the game, it was announced New Orleans would host the January 1965 AFL All-Star Game, an event that would turn out to be more monumental than many imagined. Saturday, January 9, 1965, the first of several anticipated, well-publicized days leading into Tulane Stadium hosting the American Football League All-Star Game on January 16th, a game whose proceeds were going to the New Orleans Police Foundation. Players for both the East and West squads were arriving at the Roosevelt Hotel and the Fontainebleau in potentially the biggest football game in the city's brief pro history, a game that could easily clinch an expansion team with a huge attendance. Then the news broke early Monday morning, January 11th. 21 African-American players refused to play in the game after claims of being denied taxicab service and entrance into French Quarter clubs. Here's former San Diego defensive lineman Earl Faison.
So we decided we're going to visit the French Quarter, 5-6 black guys. We walked up to a club door, and they would get quiet, indicating, no, you don't come in. So we walked past 4 or 5 different clubs, couldn't get access to any of them. One guy yelled out, you so-and-so and so's get off the street. John F. Kennedy is not playing in here tonight. We walk up to that next club. This little guy standing there pulls out a gun. You are not coming in here. We recoil, jump back. Ernie Ladd jumps forward. The guy puts the gun at Ernie Ladd's nose. I will pull the trigger. I did not feel that it was a brave thing to do. I did not think about the social value involved in it for later years. None of that entered into my mind. My personal reaction was that as a black man, I cannot go through this indignity and play a game here.
And more on the story from former Chargers tackle Ron Mix.
But the second day we were there, we got on the bus, and the bus was like third empty. Whoever was our coach said, "Where is everybody?" And somebody said, "None of the black players are here. They're all in a meeting. They may not play in the game." And so I got off the bus and went to the meeting. And I remember they were all in the room, and I'm thinking that I wanted them to be liked, and I didn't want them to do anything that would cause them to be disliked. And I think, well, the best thing to do is if we stayed and played and called attention to what is going on here, then their teammates, you see, would like them. But I didn't see the bigger picture, importance of taking a stand. But they told me what had happened. I said, well, if you're not going to do that, he said, I'll join the boycott with you.
The African-American players promptly contacted AFL Commissioner Joe Foss in Chicago, to which Foss backed the players and told them the game would be moved to another location, which eventually was Houston. Local promoter Dave Dixon had a sit-down meeting with the players immediately after he heard about the situation, but his words were of no avail. Buddy Diliberto, longtime newspaper and later television and radio sportscaster, spoke with promoter Dave Dixon during that pivotal Sunday in room 990 of the Roosevelt Hotel, where Dixon told him, quote, "We'll blow pro football if they walk out," close quote. One day later, Dixon released a statement which included, quote, "To accept the actions of Sunday as a death warrant to our effort is, in effect, to accept defeat of New Orleans, which we will not do," close quote. In fact, More and more, he started promoting the idea of a domed stadium for the future team in a building he called the Superdome, a project he thought would cost some $30 million. Later that year, on August 14th, over 75,000 fans assisted Dixon's recharge for pro football as the Colts beat the Cardinals 22-10. The crowd was the largest to attend a pro sporting event in the southern United States at that time. In fact, the crowd at the game was so large, all of the Tulane Stadium vendors ran out of soft drinks at halftime. But the work was definitely not over yet for Dave Dixon and his group, as 1966 would turn out to be the pivotal year for New Orleans pro football future. First, on August the 6th, the Lions came to town to play the Vikings at Tulane Stadium in another exhibition contest that finished in a 6-6 tie. Some 38,229 people attended the game. Some felt another 20,000 would have showed up, but rain earlier in the day may have scared many of those folks off. Then heading into the second contest between the Colts and the Eagles 7 days later, reports began to surface that New Orleans may end up getting an AFL expansion team instead of an NFL. Concern being that if it was an AFL team, then voters would turn down the statewide election on November 8th to build a new stadium based on the aftermath following the January 1965 AFL All-Star Game. In addition, an AFL team in New Orleans, at least until the full league merger, may not be supported well because of the same previously described fallout. One day later, it was reported that the NFL would expand in 67 and the AFL in 68, easing some local fans. On August 13th, some 41,352 fans attended that Colts-Eagles preseason contest, with the Colts winning that contest 31-17. And then came September 8th, 1966. New York U.S. Representative Emanuel Celler, chairman of the Congress Antitrust Subcommittee, rejected the NFL's exemption request that would have allowed it and the AFL to merge without being classified as a monopoly. Celler told Commissioner Rozelle to go ahead with the merger since at the time no lawsuit had been filed against it. That all changed one day later, September 9th. A group called Chicago Football Associates, led by stockbroker Robert Nussbaum, filed a federal lawsuit against the planned merger for some $12 million, claiming his group was denied an AFL expansion team as a result of the intended merger. By September 16th, Dave Dixon further solidified the city's chances of landing a pro franchise via one of his football partners named David Kleck. Mr. Kleck had several Washington, D.C. connections, and Dixon realized that if members of the Louisiana congressional delegation could help the NFL by getting a limited antitrust exemption, hence get the full merger to occur, then Dixon's dream of locally based pro football would be realized. Louisiana U.S. Senator Russell Long met with Commissioner Rozelle to get the process going. On October 14th, reports surfaced that the NFL-AFL merger may not occur over issues of how exempt the potential merged league should be. Congressman Celler said he wanted to explore the situation as deeply as possible before agreeing to anything in committee hearings. As a result, the House bill on the matter stalled. Commissioner Rozelle was considering calling off the merger if the issue didn't pass Congress by the time the session ended about a week and a half later. This potentially would have also put on hold New Orleans expansion franchise. 4 days later, a sudden turn of events developed as Russell Long and Hale Boggs got around Celler's stalling and met with the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee, and both groups approved their amendment of allowing for the limited antitrust exemption, which was attached to a non-related bill which eliminated the 7% investment credit tax. The bill passed both houses of Congress. 1 day later, Congressman Celler called this, quote, a shameful thing, unquote. One interesting footnote from this famous end-around by Long and Boggs. Just prior to the measure being voted on, Pete Rozelle was in the hallways of Congress waiting for the bill to be approved when Boggs approached him and stated in question form that New Orleans would get the next franchise if the bill passed. Rozelle replied that he would definitely consider it. Boggs got so angry that he was going back into the House chambers to cancel the vote when Rozelle grabbed him by the shoulder and stated, quote, you got it, close quote. The bill was officially signed into law by President Lyndon Johnson on November 8, 1966. Then on Tuesday, October 25, 1966, Pete Rozelle met with Tulane Stadium officials and received an okay to host pro football in their stadium until a new facility could be constructed. November 1, 1966, the Times-Picayune front page headline stated, quote, New Orleans to be given NFL franchise, close quote. Here's some of that audio from Commissioner Pete Rozelle at the formal presentation at the Pontchartrain Hotel.
Professional football has voted a franchise to the state of Louisiana, the city of New Orleans.
A week later, on November the 8th, statewide voters approved Constitutional Amendment Number 10, which would get the ball rolling for the eventual building of the Louisiana Superdome. Many names were thrown about as to who would be the majority owner of the new professional franchise in New Orleans. One of the leading names was Louis Russell Sr. In an interview he did with Wayne Mack in the early 90s, he stated that he was promised the opportunity to buy the team by U.S. Senator Russell Long, a conversation that Long said did not happen. Eventually, the decision was made on December 15, 1966. After several meetings, an announcement was made at 4:20 p.m. by Commissioner Pete Rozelle, awarding the franchise to John Mecom Jr. Here's some audio from that announcement.
We are announcing, after considerable deliberation and a most difficult decision, the franchise award to the new ownership. We, all of us in the National Football League, myself, particularly the committee that came down and interviewed the prospective applicants, we all felt extremely flattered at the high caliber of individuals who were interested in having a New Orleans franchise. We have unanimously approved the new ownership structure for the New Orleans franchise. And the majority owner of the franchise will be Mr. John Mecom Jr. of Houston, Texas.
Just 1 week after John Mecom was named majority owner of the Saints, Vic Schwenk is named Director of Player Personnel. He is the first official front office hire by the club. Then on January 9, 1967, New Orleans' new NFL franchise is officially nicknamed the Saints. The name was inspired by local promoter Dave Dixon's love for the song When the Saints Go Marching In.
Definitely. I tell you why. Simply because it's a great ad that would be working for the pro club every day of the year. You know, 100 times a night in the French Quarter, you have When the Saints Go Marching In.
I was sitting in a little cafe in Paris with my wife, and there was a little jazz combo in there, and they started playing When the Saints Go Marching In. I looked at my wife and said, my goodness, what a perfect name for the New Orleans franchise football team we're going to get someday. Archbishop Philip Haddon, brand new in town, hadn't been there 2 weeks. And to my still embarrassment, when he walked by the table, I reached out and stopped him and grabbed him with my arm, and I immediately got up and apologized, and I said, Archbishop, here's the thing. I want you to tell me whether you think it would be sacrilegious to have the Saints as a name for the football team. He said, no, indeed. He says it would be a perfect name, and he says, besides, I have this terrible feeling that somehow we're going to need all the extra help we can get.
Then on January 27th, Tom Fears is named the first ever Saints head coach, and also he happened to be the first ever NFL head coach of Hispanic descent. Fears had been an assistant with the Packers and Falcons and earned Hall of Fame credentials as a wide receiver with the Rams in the 1950s.
I want them to look tough. This is a tough game. It's a violent game. It's a game of blocking offensively. It's a game of tackling on defense. And as long as they're tough and do their job, we'll show well. And that's what the people of New Orleans expect from us.
Owner John Mecom Jr. also assigns Larry Carl, formerly of the Cowboys, as executive assistant to the Saints organizing committee, a de facto form of the term general manager. 2 days later, the Saints signed their first ever player to a contract, kicker Paige Cothran of Ole Miss. Then on February 10th of 1967, the expansion draft is held for the Saints, where they select 3 unprotected players from 14 NFL teams. 28 of those 42 players selected would make the Saints' regular season roster. March 6th of 67, the Saints trade away their first selection in the upcoming 67 draft, along with center Bill Curry, who they got from Green Bay in the expansion draft, in return for Colts quarterback Gary Quazzo. 2 days later, the first season ticket drive launched, resulting in 20,000 sold on the first day. A grand total of 33,400 were sold before the first preseason home game in early September of 67. Tickets ranged from $1 to $6. On March 14th of 67, the first ever NFL-AFL combined draft is held, where the Saints, as an expansion team, got a selection at the beginning and end of each of the 17 rounds. The Saints' first ever selection was Alabama fullback Les Kelly, who would later be converted to linebacker.
You were put out there and it seemed like expected to know everything that there was to know about playing linebacker. And I wasn't. Or I didn't know.
13 of those rookie draft choices would wind up making the Saints' regular season roster. On July 1st of 67, rookies report for the first ever Saints training camp at Cal Western in San Diego. 5 days after that, future NFL Hall of Famer Jim Taylor signs with the Saints in compensation, since there was no true free agency back then, Commissioner Pete Rozelle has the Saints give up a first-round pick in 1968 to Taylor's old team, the Green Bay Packers. July 8th, veterans report to that first-ever Saints training camp. Then on July 12th, the Saints formally announced their mascot will be a live St. Bernard dog. They hold a fan contest to determine the dog's name, where the winning selection was Gumbo. Then on July 13th, Larry Carl resigns his position over what he told the Times-Picayune was, quote, internal politics, close quote. Many felt Carl was upset that his good friend Bedford Wynn, a public relations man for the Saints who had also come over from the Dallas Cowboys, had been let go a couple of days earlier. On July 15th, the Saints send guard Don Krofcheck to the Chicago Bears in return for future NFL Hall of Famer defensive end Doug Atkins.
They never had a team here. There's no tradition. And we had some heck of a fans here. They turned out, and we ended up had a pretty good ball team, no pressure on us. We're short of numbers. Had we had 3 or 4 more numbers of positions, we've been in good shape. And I really enjoyed my last 3 years of football.
On July 18th, linebacker Steve Stonebreaker changes his mind and formally signs with the Saints after considering retirement. 2 days after that, Bert Rose is officially named Saints general manager. Rose was Commissioner Pete Rozelle's assistant during the ownership search for New Orleans' new NFL franchise. And then August 2nd, 1967, the first ever Saints preseason game, a contest which they lose to the Los Angeles Rams in Anaheim 16-7. Before this particular contest, Saints owner John Mecum Jr. met Disneyland Entertainment director Tommy Walker and liked him so much that he hired him on the spot to run the Saints Entertainment division and would do so through the 1970 season. Tommy Walker was known for putting together extravagant shows, sometimes spending upwards of $20,000 per game, from marching bands to the famous Rocket Man. With his connections to Disneyland, he brought in entertainers such as Carol Channing. Once even getting astronaut Michael Collins, who had recently just come back from the moon. Another memorable halftime show by Tommy Walker was in 1969. He decided to put together an ostrich race, where 3 individuals would be sitting in a surrey connected to an ostrich, where the winner had to cross the opposing goal line 100 yards away first. But one people remember a whole lot, which definitely was not a favorite of Mr. Walker's, was the November 1, 1970 recreation of the Battle of New Orleans at halftime. A cannon misfired and 2 people wound up getting injured in the process. Some people felt this moment is what eventually led Tommy Walker to resign following the 1970 season. Opening day arrived, September 17th, 1967. Let's listen to a little bit of the fanfare from the opening ceremony.
Number 27, Walter Flea Roberts. And at fullback from Louisiana State University.
2 hot air balloons were scheduled to rise from the floor of Tulane Stadium during the pregame festivities, but somehow one of those balloons couldn't quite take off and wound up landing in one corner of Tulane Stadium, to which a member of the media replied, "Hopefully that's not the direction this franchise is going to be starting in." What other folks remember is that exciting opening kickoff by rookie John Gilliam. Here's the call from CBS Television.
New Orleans in white and gold. Gossett split us into the bottom. The game is underway, and the New Orleans Saints are now active in regular season play in the National Football League. John Gilliam to take on the field. He's on the way. Here's that tremendous student, John Gilliam. Runs away from the entire
And now here's an interview John Gilliam did about that remarkable play.
Well, first of all, I was almost late getting to the stadium. It was wild. I mean, it's a feeling that it's hard to explain. You know, I walk into the stadium here, it's 80,000 to 90,000 in Tulane Stadium, a white shirt, bow tie. You know, and I never played before these many people before. And we won the toss, and the ball came to me. I just took the ball and started running. I mean, I was really afraid. Once I saw it open, it was just like, hey, it's over. And once I got past the 40, I just put it in a different gear.
The Rams would go on to win the contest 27-13. But they definitely had some memorable names from days gone by in that first season. Let's take a listen to some of them. For example, the great fullback Jimmy Taylor.
Because you have had the experience and been with some good, fine ball players, and you know you're really knowledgeable about the game, and you can help a lot of these young players and work with them, and they're all young and hard-working kids, and they want to learn and want to be good football players, and it does give you an opportunity to bring out some of the leadership qualities in you.
Here's an interesting story from Dave Witzel, who in 1967 had 10 interceptions and was also United Press International Comeback Player of the Year.
I'm lined up on a guy, and I'm hearing this, back up, back up, back up. No, get outside. I'm going, who the hell is this? I'm looking over it like this, trying to see what's going on, and I come off the field. I said to Fierce, who the hell is that assistant? Well, it was a guy that was a friend of Meekham's who he'd given the sideline pass to, and he was in the dress business from Houston.
And wide receiver Danny Abramowitz always had a positive outlook.
I think that if we get a few breaks and if our team morale stays as high as it is, and we do have the potential and ability on this team to go all the way, and I think with a few breaks and a little bit of maybe this woman's luck, we can do it.
And likely one of the greatest characters from that original football team, a gentleman who played center and never missed an offensive snap the first 2 seasons of the Saints, Joe Wendrohowski.
He said, at center, number 54, Joe Wendrohowski was. Man, I came running out there. I felt like I was King Kong, Godzilla. I thought I was 10 foot tall. Man, I thought I was going to yell, oh. If you couldn't play football here in New Orleans with the Saints fans, then you got to go see some doctor, Dr. Zhivago or whoever, or Dr. Spajinski that'll give you a ring job.
One of the more memorable incidents from that first season occurred on October 8th of 67 in Yankee Stadium in a contest against the New York Football Giants. The Saints would lose the contest 27-21. Saints wide receiver Tom Hall ran out of bounds with the football, only to be hit by Giants center Greg Larson. Well, from that point, let's let Stoney tell you the story.
It was well documented that Tommy Hall had been in the hospital for Wednesday, the previous week before the game, because of a cheap shot he took against the Cleveland Browns the week before. So when I went over there just to see if Tom Hall was all right, Larson had to lash out at me verbally, and subsequently I just put him on notice that I would be back.
Quarterback Billy Kilmer also chimes in on the big fight that occurred after the game.
I knew Greg Larson. I came up with Greg, and he was just a mild mannered. He didn't have any animosity in his whole heart. And I remember that he was looking away, and Tommy ran out of bounds, and then Greg turned around and put his arm up real quick. And it looked like he gave him a forearm shiver, but I think Greg told me later on he was trying to protect himself.
Steve Stonebreaker told fans back in 1989 that the worst injury that came out of that Yankee melee was to Danny Abramowitz, not because Danny was hit by anybody, but Danny was running off the field so quickly with his helmet off that he incorrectly gauged the height of the Yankee Stadium dugout roof and wound up cutting his head while trying to make the first step down into the locker room. Commissioner Pete Rozelle fined Stonebreaker $1,000 for the incident. A group of New Orleans businessmen decided to pool their money together to pay Stonebreaker's fine. The commissioner ruled that would be illegal by NFL bylaws. As a result, the men kept the money, and they changed the initial name of their club from the Enforcers Club to the Touchdown Club of New Orleans. Strange irony would be decades later, the club would get permission from the NFL to issue an annual Lifetime Achievement Award in Pete Rozelle's name. The first ever Saints win occurred on November the 5th, 1967 in Tulane Stadium, 31-24. After starting 0-7, Walter Flea Roberts scored 3 touchdowns in the contest, including a 91-yard kickoff return. 2 weeks after the Eagles win, the Saints would play the Eagles again in Philadelphia. On the last play of the first half, Saints at their own 2-yard line, quarterback Billy Kilmer rolls out to the left and throws a pass as far as he can, which Flea Roberts catches at the midfield stripe. He ran down the sideline trying to score a touchdown, but got pushed out of bounds at the other 2-yard line, totaling a 96-yard non-scoring reception, a record that likely may never be broken in Saints history. Wide receiver Danny Abramowitz was about to be cut in training camp when he refused to take his playbook back to the coach's office. Instead, he confronted Coach Fears, stating that Fears broke a promise to him and didn't give him a chance to play in the games. When Fears realized Danny was serious about not leaving, he gave Danny an opportunity to play in the next preseason game on special teams coverage. Well, Danny wound up making the squad as a result of that. The week before that Eagles win, Walter Flea Roberts was scheduled to play against the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, he got called to National Guard duty in Kentucky. As a result, Danny Abramowitz had to fill in at the position, and the rest, as they say, is history. The Saints would go on to win 3 games that year, including their last home game on November 26 against the Atlanta Falcons, 27-24, when the Saints started at their own 3-yard line and drove all the way down the field to score a touchdown, a pass from Billy Kilmer to tight end Kent Kramer with 30 seconds to go. They would also win their last road game of the year at the Washington Redskins, 30-14. Saints offensive tackle Dick Anderson scored the first ever safety in club history when he tackled Redskins return man John Love on a fumbled punt return in the end zone. Just a few days after that 67 campaign ended, on December 23rd, the Associated Press reports that the Saints are wanting Vince Lombardi to be their next head coach and GM. Later, Saints owner John Mecom Jr. flew in Lombardi for an interview, but Lombardi wound up staying out of football in '68 before joining the Redskins in '69. Then on February 16th of '68, Saints officially announced that GM Bert Rose is on a leave of absence. Reports later surfaced that internal friction is leading to Rose being replaced. And on March 29th, the Saints formally announced that Vic Schwenk is the new general manager. And then a bit of controversy occurred after training camp started. On July 17th, San Francisco wide receiver Dave Parks signs with the Saints after playing out his option. Since this was not an era of true free agency, the NFL front office decided what type of compensation the Saints had to give the 49ers. Well, 9 days later, Commissioner Pete Rozelle decided to make an example of the Saints by forcing them to give up their first-round selection from 1968, Kevin Hardy, defensive end from Notre Dame, and their future first-round pick in 1969. Some media outlets reported that Rozelle may have still been bitter with the Saints over the way his good friend Bert Rose had been released by the club. On September 6 of 1968, the Saints were going to play a preseason game in Shreveport, Louisiana against the Vikings. Jimmy Taylor was suiting up for the contest when he decided enough was enough, went back to the hotel room, did not play in the game, and 4 days later, on September 10th, announced that he was retiring as an NFL player. He would stay employed by the Saints in a front office role through the 1976 season. The Saints' first regular season victory of 1968 was on September 22nd against the Redskins in Tulane Stadium, 31-17. Out of that game probably came the first true special teams coverage star in Saints history, Wild Bill Cody, who was given a game ball for his outstanding performance. Let's listen to his memories of days gone by.
Those first few years, we had probably the best sideshow of any professional football team, with the likes of Al Hurd and his people playing on the sidelines, and probably a little bit of a distraction. You know, were we there to celebrate and party and have fun and make sure the hot dogs didn't get cold and the cold beer didn't get hot, or were we there to play the ball game? You know, I'm not sure we figured that out for a while.
An interesting contest was September 29th against the St. Louis Cardinals in Tulane Stadium. Saints have a 17-0 lead into the third quarter before the Cardinals gradually come back. Then in the fourth quarter, a controversial pass interference penalty is called on Saints defensive back Gene Howard, which gives the Cardinals the ball down at the 1-yard line, and they eventually take the lead off of that 21-20. However, the Saints still had a chance to win the game, but Charlie Durkee's late field goal attempt was blocked. The club would finish 4-9-1 after starting 3-3. And at that 6-game mark, the Saints were actually tied for first place in the Century Division. The Saints defense improved with 34 sacks on the season. Defensive tackle Dave Rowe would go to the Pro Bowl. Don McCall would lead in rushing with 637 yards, and Danny Abramowitz in receiving with 54 catches. Dave Witzel would lead the team with 6 interceptions. For the first time in club history, the Saints beat a divisional opponent twice in the same season. On October 20th, they beat the Steelers in Pittsburgh 16-12, and on December 15th at Tulane Stadium 24-14. The most noteworthy play in that second win over Pittsburgh came in the second quarter, as second-year player Charlie Brown took a punt 53 yards and ran it back for a touchdown. Along the way to the end zone, 9 Steelers defenders touched him. The 1969 Saints campaign finished with their best record ever at that time at 5-9. However, the season definitely didn't start off very well, and things wouldn't turn around until the Saints had to travel upriver for a contest against the Redbirds. November 2nd, 1969, one day following All Saints Day, the 0-6 New Orleans Saints flew some 600 miles north to Busch Stadium in St. Louis to take on the 2-3-1 Cardinals in 45-degree weather. The Saints were easily on pace to have their worst season ever when the club would turn things around in a manner that even the biggest of diehards were thrown off by. Saints head coach Tom Thiers decided a change in offense was needed, and as a result, wide receiver Dave Parks was moved over to the tight end position, and former defensive back turned wide receiver Al Dodd of Gretna, Louisiana, was put into the starting role. The crowd of 46,718 would in turn witness NFL history as a grand total of 12 touchdown passes were thrown, 6 each by Saints quarterback Billy Kilmer, who had 345 passing yards, and Cardinals quarterback Charlie Johnson with 374. Saints running back Tony Baker added 110 rushing yards, and Al Dodd would have 145 receiving yards. Cornerback Elijah Nevitt had 2 fumble recoveries and an interception. Dave Witzel would have the other INT. One good omen going into the game was for the first time all season, including preseason, the Saints won the opening coin toss. The Saints started off on a 25-yard touchdown pass from Kilmer to Dave Parks in the first quarter. Then the Cardinals came back with 2 touchdown catches by wide receiver Davey Williams, who hadn't caught a TD pass all season prior to this game, to make it 14-7 in the second quarter. The Saints would score the remaining first half points on a Tom Dempsey 43-yard field goal, plus TD catches by fullback Ernie Wheelwright and wide receiver Danny Abramowitz to make it 23-14 Saints at the half.
Kilmer takes a snap, looking back, looking once, throwing to the sideline, hitting Abramowitz, and he's in for the touchdown. Danny Abramowitz on a 5-yard route takes it in for the touchdown, and New Orleans extends its lead.
The third quarter featured Saints running back Don Shives scoring on a 28-yard pass where, ironically, on a previous play, he scored but was called back on a penalty. Ernie Wheelwright scored on the game's only rushing touchdown later in the third to make it 37-14. Then ex-Saints wide receiver John Gilliam comes in to score for the Cardinals on a 28-yard TD pass, but the Saints countered with TD receptions by Abramowitz and Parks to make the early fourth quarter score 51-21 Saints. Cardinals' Dave Williams came back with 2 more TD receptions and nearly started a fight with Saints defensive back Dave Witzel after the last of those scores, rubbing it in that he scored on him. The Cardinals' Roy Shivers scored the last Cardinals TD on a 14-yard reception, but it was too little too late. The Saints won 51-42. The Cardinals also did themselves in with 10 penalties for 75 yards, but had 2 100-yard receivers in Gilliam and Williams, the second time in Saints history an opponent did so. The Saints set then club game records for first downs with 26, total offensive yards at 508, passing yards, and most points. Billy Kilmer would later be named AP Offensive Player of the Week. An interesting fact from the contest, the Saints actually finished the game with 181 kick return yards. And as for the season, the running game of Andy Livingston and Tony Baker rushed for almost 1,500 yards and was named to the Pro Bowl along with guard Jake Cupp, kicker Tom Dempsey, plus head coach Tom Fears and his staff. The defense also held their own as veteran defensive end Doug Atkins would retire after 17 NFL seasons, the last 3 of which were with New Orleans, and safety Dave Witzel, who had 19 interceptions in his Saints career, would be traded after the season ended. Also in 1969, Danny Abramowitz became the first ever Saints receiver with over 1,000 yards in one season, with 73 catches for 1,015 yards. Another interesting fact from that 69 campaign, the Saints for the first time ever won 3 games in a row, including a November 16th contest at the New York Giants where Tom Dempsey makes 4 field goals, including the final one with 11 seconds left. And on November 23rd in 1969 at Tulane Stadium against the 49ers, 26 seconds left, Ernie Wheelwright scores on a 4-yard touchdown run to seal the first win over San Francisco, 43-38. And now we like to pay tribute to those players of the 1960s, the ones that we thought stood out more than any others at their position for the Saints. Quarterback Billy Kilmer, running backs Andy Livingston and Tony Baker, fullback Tom Barrington, wide receivers Danny Abramowitz and Dave Parks, tight end Ray Pogue, offensive tackles Errol Linden and Jerry Strum, guards Jake Cupp and Dell Williams, center Joe Wentrahowski, defensive ends Doug Atkins and Brian Schweda, defensive tackles Dave Rowe and Mike Tilleman, linebackers Johnny Brewer, Fred Whittingham, Steve Stonebreaker, and Ted Davis. Cornerbacks Elijah Nevitt and Gene Howard. Safeties Dave Witzel and Bo Burris. Kicker Tom Dempsey. Punter Tom McNeil. Return specialist John Gilliam. Special teams coverage Bill Cody. Deep snapper Jackie Burkett. And holder Dave Witzel, who was also very good at blocking field goals and extra points as well. And now we're going to take a Saints timeout. Meaning we're going to look at another aspect of pro football history. In this case, March 19th, 1969. It was officially announced by the NFL New Orleans would host Super Bowl IV. The local committee was led by Al Hirt and George Healy Jr. On January 11, 1970, some 80,562 fans filled Tulane Stadium for the first Super Bowl held in New Orleans. Game number 4 featured the 12-2 Minnesota Vikings with the number 1 offense in the NFL under head coach Bud Grant against Hank Stram's Kansas City Chiefs with a record of 11-3 and the AFL's number 1 defense. The contest would stay in favor of the Chiefs from the get-go.
Hi, I'm Jack Buck. Ed Summerall alongside. Kansas City is the type of team, a physical team, a hitting team that Minnesota has had trouble with throughout the entire year. They expect a tough game.
Kansas City's Jan Stenerud would set a long-standing Super Bowl field goal record of 48 yards and make 3 on the day.
Dawson Holding, Stenerud hit 27 out of 35 this year. Stenerud brings it there, and it's good. And the City goes out in front, and Dawson did a great job of getting that ball down.
Running back Mike Garrett scored the only touchdown of the first half on a play famously known as
65 toss power trap. Urbanus is on the left side, and here's Garrett planting in. He ran by Dixon as the extra defensive lineman who was put in there, and went right in from the 5-yard line for the touchdown. That blocked by Mormon. As he gets Page heading for the outside, Dixon can't catch up, and Garrett has great balance.
That's because Hank Stram was the first coach to be microphoned for a Super Bowl, and his excitement about the play was memorable.
Nice going, baby. Yes, sir, Rat. Yes, sir, boy. Yeah! The Mentor. 65 toss power try. Yeah! I tell you that baby was there. Woo!
The Chiefs sealed the game in the third quarter thanks to this 46-yard touchdown pass play.
Quick snap and the quick pass to Taylor. He got away from McGee. He's inside the 15. He scored from the 47-yard line. The softy missed him. McGee missed him. A touchdown pass to Otis Taylor changes the game around again.
The Chiefs outrushed the Vikings 151 to 67 in yardage, and the Vikings' John Henderson was the only 100-plus yard receiver in the game with 111 yards. The Chiefs' offensive line dominated the Vikings' defensive line in by far one of the huge upsets in pro football history, and showed the AFL was ready to compete on a regular basis with the NFL the following season. After the game, Coach Stram greatly accepted the Super Bowl trophy.
We appreciate this honor greatly, and I assure you that this belongs to our whole squad and our whole organization. It's a great compliment to a great bunch of people, great compliment to Lamar. But we're very happy to be champions of the world, and we're going to do everything we possibly can to maintain the prestige of this great honor.
This win also marked the first time in major pro football history that the championship team had a majority of African American starters. The irony of it all, it occurred 5 years to the date of the African American players' boycott of the AFL All-Star Game. As for the 1970 Saints season, it was just simply full of turmoil. Head coach Tom Fears and general manager Vic Schwenk actually got into a fist fight during the NFL college draft in late January of 1970. Later on, John Meekum decided that Fears would get final say over all personnel decisions. Later that year in early August, Fears was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame for his outstanding years as a wide receiver with the Los Angeles Rams. Ironically, the Saints would play the Vikings in that year's Pro Football Hall of Fame contest. It was a strugglesome year for the Saints, finishing 2-11-1. They didn't have a single running back that would rush for 100 yards in any given game. Injuries also depleted the Saints throughout the roster. In fact, during the season, a couple of players decided to retire, Ernie Wheelwright and Johnny Brewer. It was a season so bad that on November 22nd, in the contest against Denver, Saints defensive back Major Hazelton was penalized 15 yards for a late tripping out of bounds on Denver running back Billy Van Heusen, where in actuality, Van Heusen tripped over Gumbo the mascot and the official was out of position. Tom Fears was fired after the Saints went 1-5-1. A few days earlier, he told the press that he didn't think all of his players was giving 100%. When that statement was made, he basically lost the team from there. After his firing on November 2nd, the Saints announced that J.D. Roberts would become the interim head coach.
When I was asked if I would assume the job the rest of the season, I said yes. I just expected one thing, and that was the wholehearted support of the administration. And as far as being a disciplinarian is concerned, I think anyone in coaching is a disciplinarian. If you don't have discipline, you can't, you might as well not even go out. And as far as I'm concerned, maybe the way I go about it will be different than someone else. But you have to be yourself, and as far as I'm concerned, a team has to be disciplined on the field, off the field, and everything else. And those people who do not like that attitude, or don't take that attitude, and they won't be with us.
J.D. had worked with the Saints as a linebackers coach in 1968. He was coaching a minor league team called the Richmond, Virginia Roadrunners, and under 1.5 seasons of Roberts, they were 0-23. November the 8th, J.D.'s first game against the Detroit Lions. The Lions turned the ball over 6 times, with Saints linebacker Jackie Burkett intercepting 2 passes. For all those trivia fans out there, the Saints' only touchdown of the game was scored by Tom Barrington on a play called Red Right 41. The Lions would take the lead with 11 seconds left on a short 18-yard Arrowman field goal before the Saints would gradually come back. And then, as they say, the rest is history. First, here's the call by CBS and Don Criqui.
The Lions 17, the Saints 16. 11 seconds to play. Burrow, 00, and Dodd, 25, back for the kickoff. It'll carry short. Dodd at the 14. Running to get out of bounds. He does so with 8 seconds to play. So the Saints, with 8 seconds left and all their timeouts, which are of little importance now, really, other than they just need one, will have to try to get in field goal range. Dempsey has hit from, I believe, 55 yards away in a regular season game. 55 yards against the Rams last season. Detroit will be in a prevent defense. They have 5 defensive backs in the game now. Rasmussen away back, along with Weegar. 8 seconds on the clock. 3 receivers go long for New Orleans. Here's a pass. It's complete. Now it's ruled incomplete. Al Dodd was out of bounds when he caught the ball. Now let's see. Are they going to rule it complete? It's complete. Well, not only will Tom Dempsey hit this one, he's got a very slight wind at his back. He'll set a National Football League record in addition to winning the game. He's tying a 63-yard field goal. I don't believe this. It's good. I don't believe it. The field goal attempt was good from 63 yards away. It's incredible. Tulane Stadium has gone wild. A 63-yard field goal. It is incredible. The Lions are beaten 19-17 on a 63-yard field goal. The old record was 56 yards by Burt Rettgenstein.
And now here's the call over to Saints Radio Network by Al Wester.
And if you believe in miracles, my friends, it'll take something like that to help us now. Here is man to kick off. Al Dodd to the 20, to the 25, and out of bounds at the 28-yard line on the run back. 8 seconds remain on the clock. Kilmer with the snap. Back in the pocket to throw. He looks. He throws. It is caught. And out of bounds at the 45-yard line. There's still 2 seconds remaining.
Tom Dempsey will try to kick the longest field goal in National League history. They're sending him on with 2 seconds left. Scarpetti will hold. Holy daylight, I've seen them all, but this is the most exciting moment in Saint history. Scarpetti will hold at the Saint 38-yard line, and Dempsey will try the longest kick he's ever attempted. 2 seconds left. Here's the snap. The ball is down. Dempsey kicks. It's on the way. It is good. It's good. The Saints have won. The Saints have won. The stadium is wild. Dempsey is being mobbed. The time has run out. The Saints have won 19-17. Dempsey with a 63-yard field goal. The longest field goal in the history of the National League. When with 2 seconds left to go, the Saints are being mobbed now. The new coach is being taken off on the shoulders of his team. The Saints have beaten the Lions 19-17. That's the end of the game, ladies and gentlemen. The final score, the New Orleans Saints 19, the Detroit Lions 17.
And now here's a couple of interviews of Dempsey right after the game.
Yeah, what did Scarpetti say to you?
Nothing really. He just he said back up a little bit farther. You know, he said we're back and just kick the hell out of it.
How did it feel? Well, I don't know yet, Jim, tell you the truth. I'm still kind of riding the cloud. I'd like to think about this one for a while.
You didn't talk it over with the coach. There were 2 seconds left, and he just said go in, huh?
Well, Coach Heinrich said the only chance we got is to kick it. And the coach said go out and kick it. So, we went out and tried.
Did you have confidence that you could hit that far?
Well, I had confidence I could kick the ball 62 yards, but I was wondering thing on my mind is whether I could kick it straight 62 or 63 yards, wherever it was,
What were your thoughts while you were waiting on that one?
Just to kick it as hard as I could.
Just to kick the heck out of it.
Yeah, and just hope that it stayed straight.
And for the record, the holder was Joe Scarpati, the deep snapper Jackie Burkett, and the men who blocked up front, Bill Cody, Willie Towns, Dave Rowe, Wayne Coleman, Dave Long, Errol Linden, Mike Taylor, and Jake Cupp. And on December 28th of 1970, the Saints signed J.D. Roberts to a 2-year contract extension. Story goes, according to Buddy Diliberto, longtime sportscaster in New Orleans television, that owner John Meekum stated that J.D. Roberts could be the next Vince Lombardi. The following 2 seasons would somewhat disagree with that comment. On January 23, 1971, the Saints traded away quarterback Billy Kilmer to the Washington Redskins in return for the Redskins' 4th and 8th round selections in 1972, plus linebacker Tom Russell, a native of Thibodaux. The trade was made over personal issues between Kilmer and owner John Mecum. 5 days after that, the college draft was held.
New Orleans Saints select on the first round quarterback Archie Manning, University of Mississippi.
With the 2nd overall pick.
Certainly a pleasure for me to be a part of the Saints organization.
The Saints would go on to a 4-8-2 record in 1971. Archie made an immediate impact on opening day, September 19, 1971, at home versus the Rams, 24-20.
This play decides the game. Manning sprinting out. Manning is in for the touch. He fumbles the ball. No, he is in for the touchdown. As soon as he touched down, the ball was dead. Boy, that's a display of guts football. I stand here and I salute J.D. Roberts of the New Orleans Saints. That takes guts. That takes a lot of courage to do that. There's 26 teams in the National Football League, and I ask you how many coaches would go for that play when they have a chance to tie the Los Angeles Rams with 3 seconds left. On the last play of the game, they go for a win, and they get it.
Here's Archie Manning looking back at that first game.
Kind of a sad state, too. 14-year career's over. To go back and pick out your highlights, and your first game might have been your highlight or one of your best games.
October 17th, the Saints upset Dallas 24-14 thanks to Manning, plus several key returns and turnovers by special team players like Dallas Howell and Dave Copay. And here's J.D. Roberts on that Cowboys contest.
Tom Landry did us a pretty big favor anyway. Instead of starting Staubach, he started Craig Morton. We were delighted when that happened. We felt like we had some kind of a chance because the way we could get to them was to blitz. And it worked out for us, and we were able to take a 17-0 lead into the late in the third quarter. And then Tom Landry decides to play Staubach, which was to our demise because it didn't take him long to get 14 points on the board. So now it's 17-14. We have to make an 82-yard drive to ice the game, and Archie did it.
Manning would be sacked 40 times in his rookie season, and Archie wound up missing half the games that year due to injury, and Ed Hargett would replace him. In the November 14th contest at San Francisco, Virgil Robinson would catch the winning touchdown pass with less than 2 minutes to go.
Hargett with a long count. Hargett rolls out. He's looking for someone to throw to. He throws. It is touchdown Saints. Robinson makes the catch for the touchdown. So the Saints, with 57 seconds remaining, have taken the lead. They have driven from their 34. That roughing the passer penalty set it up.
Later, a Hugo House interception would seal the victory.
Brody back to pass. He throws over the middle. Intercepted by Holland. He is to the 50. He's to the 40. He slips and falls, gets up, goes to the 35, and it's all over. As there'll be 24 seconds left, and the Saints have pulled another upset.
2 weeks later versus Green Bay in Milwaukee, 5 Charlie Durkee field goals and a Doug Wyatt interception late would seal the victory there, 29-21. On December the 10th, General Manager Vic Schwenk is relieved of his duties when he confronted owner John Mecum about the rumors that Mecum was looking for a new front office man. 9 days later, the Saints would close out their regular season 24-20 in a loss to the Atlanta Falcons. They would lose with 40 seconds left on a Falcons pass from quarterback Bob Berry to receiver Ken Burrow. Here's another Saints timeout. In the spring of 1971, the folks at Tulane decided to have a fundraiser in order to get brand new artificial turf for their stadium in the hopes of luring Super Bowl VI to New Orleans. When that initial fundraiser came up a bit short, they came up with another concept. It was called Turf Telethon, where New Orleans native and Hollywood actor Ed Nelson hosted a telethon that was simulcasted on 3 New Orleans television stations late on a Sunday night, and fortunately enough money was raised to complete the purchase of the turf, and Super Bowl VI was awarded to New Orleans. On January 16, 1972, New Orleans hosted one of the coldest Super Bowls for a southern climate, as game number 6 featured the Miami Dolphins under head coach Don Shula against Tom Landry's Dallas Cowboys with a kickoff temperature of 41 degrees before 81,023 fans. Dallas kept a steady hand in the contest and set Super Bowl records at the time with 252 rushing yards, 23 first downs, and to this day remain the only team to prevent their opponent from scoring a touchdown in the big game. The Cowboys would score 3 touchdowns in their 24-3 victory.
Garrison is to the left of Staubach. Hill to the right. Touchdown, Allworth. Fantastic move by Lance Allworth to keep his feet in bounds. He was well covered by Curtis Johnson. Ditka's on the left. Truax is on the right. Dwayne Thomas. Touchdown. Nick Bonaconte had a crack at him, but Thomas just sort of threaded him off. 3rd and 4. This is Howie, the linebacker. 30. 20, 15, 12-yard line, Chuck Howley. Remember, he was the most valuable player in last year's Super Bowl when he intercepted 2 Baltimore Colt passes. He returned that one 40 yards. On 3rd and goal, Staubach. Touchdown, Mike Ditka. The Dolphins had a blitz going again as Buoniconti blew up the middle, but Staubach was able to pick up his tight end.
The most memorable post-game moment was in the victorious Cowboys locker room when CBS's Tom Brookshire interviewed running back Dwayne Thomas, who was known for not speaking much to the media, and by his side was Hall of Famer Jim Brown.
Dwayne, you do things with speed, but you never hurry. A lot like the great Jim Brown. You still outrun people. Are you that fast? Are you that quick, would you say?
Evidently.
Dwayne, if you like football, you must like this game, because they tell me in practice you run further than anybody else with the ball and all.
Yeah, I do. That's why I went off in pro ball, you know. That's why I am a football player, so that's why I have to live with it.
I think his silence have enabled him to do this, I think, because there was no controversy involved. There was no conflict with his teammates or his coaches.
Right.
And I think he should be commended for this. But I don't think he wants to say any more at this particular time. But I think he did want the American public to know that he is a football player and that he did want to win the Super Bowl.
Dwayne, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. Here, Dwayne Thomas, one of the great running backs, and we're glad it was done here. He broke the silence.
Cowboys quarterback Roger Staubach was Super Bowl VI MVP, and the game was not shown live in New Orleans because of a then NFL policy, even though the game did sell out more than 72 hours before kickoff. It was shown on tape delay at 10:30 p.m. that night. The policy was modified starting with the 1973 season. The 1972 Saints calendar started on an interesting note. It was January the 7th. John Mecum Jr., owner, announces that retired NASA astronaut Captain Richard Gordon would be the new head of the front office. Mecum and Gordon had been friends for a few years after they first met on a flight from Washington to Houston, and Mecum admitted for some time he was pondering whether or not to hire Gordon to work for one of the Mecum enterprises. Here's that announcement.
Today I'd like to make the announcement that retired Captain Richard Gordon has now become a member of the Saints family and to head up the Saints family in the new capacity of Executive Vice President. We've decided to do away with the title General Manager. I think the times have changed, the duties have changed, and I think it's really a misnomer with the organizational setup that we presently have and with the present setups that are going on or that are being carried out throughout professional football. It's time to make a break with tradition again, and I think the Saints, with the staff that we presently have in the front office and with the setup that we have out of David Drive, that we're on our way to becoming a contender, but most definitely being a professional football franchise that we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Here are some interesting comments made by Captain Gordon when first asked about the possibility of becoming Saints front office head.
Well, have you any football background or knowledge at all?
No, just other than the fact that I'm a very interested fan and I enjoy the game and I really love it. I think it's a great sport.
Of course, like John says, it's past being a sport in a lot of respects now. He says he thinks that a non-football man can handle the job because of the business aspects of it. Now, do you have, like, business background?
Well, no, I think that particular aspect, as far as I'm concerned, it deals with people, and that's what makes this sort of thing go. And I think people is the greatest thing about it, whether it's business or balance sheets. John has a great staff down there, and they can take care of the details of that, and there's a lot of human relationships that are involved in this type of activity. There certainly is.
The Saints would go 2-11-1 in 1972 as a healthy Archie Manning didn't miss an offensive snap. The club simply struggled throughout the season. Manning was sacked some 43 times. Joe Owens at defensive end sacked opposing quarterbacks 9 times. The Saints would play their first ever Monday night game versus the Chiefs on September 25th in a 20-17 loss thanks to a late Jan Stenerud field goal. The Saints' only 2 wins were against the Eagles on October 29th by a margin of 21-3 and to the Rams on November 26th thanks to a last-second Happy Feller field goal, 19-16.
For those of you just joining the broadcast, Julian Fagan punted 71 yards to put the Rams at bay. The Saints held the Rams, and then when the Rams tried to punt back, the punt got shanked, and New Orleans got great field position where they drove down to the 26-yard line. Ed Hargett will hold. I think the Tulane Stadium crowd will tell you whether or not Happy Feller makes this kick. There's the snap. The boot is up. It is on the way, and it is good. The New Orleans Saints have just defeated the Rams in exciting fashion. The whole bench is emptied, and they're hugging Happy Feller. I don't think think he's been this happy since he kicked the winning extra point in 1969 for the University of Texas over Arkansas.
On December 3rd of 72, the Saints played at the New York Jets. The Saints would lose 18-17. It was the first time in Saints history that an opponent defeated them without scoring a touchdown. However, the game was not televised back in New Orleans or any part of the country, and that's because of a CBS technician strike. When CBS tried to bring in replacement technicians, the striking technicians threatened violence against the replacements, so as a result, no television. And finally, a very interesting factoid on December 17, 1972. The Saints close out their season losing at home to Green Bay 30-20. In the contest, the Saints blocked 2 field goals and 2 punts. But one of the punts had a very interesting reason for being blocked. While Saints defensive end Richard Neal was given credit, in reality, the punter had stepped too far forward when he kicked the ball and actually kicked it into the rear end of his blocking up man. Richard Neal was right there and fell on it for a touchdown. And that's the story of 1972, no ifs, ands, or buts. Throughout the offseason leading into the 1973 campaign, rumors were wild about owner John Mecum selling the Saints for a dollar amount around $16 million so that he could take the money and use it to buy the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Mecum had been involved in auto racing for years, including the car he owned, won the 1966 Indy 500. For a good while, he had serious talks with George Gillette, the owner of the Harlem Globetrotters, to buy the team. But after failed negotiations and to a large degree reconsideration on his part, he decided before training camp that the Saints were not for sale. The 1973 Saints campaign started off rocky as head coach J.D. Roberts was fired 4 games into preseason, and newly acquired offensive coordinator John North became head coach. He had previously worked for the Detroit Lions. His intricate offensive play calling setup led to a lot of confusion, and the Saints would lose their first 2 regular season games, 62-7 at home against Atlanta and 40-3 at Dallas on Monday night. After the Dallas loss, in which the Saints fumbled 6 times, fan favorite wide receiver Danny Abramowitz asked to be traded, and the next day he was, to the 49ers in return for San Francisco's 4th and 5th round draft choice selections in 1974. New Orleans would go in a more positive direction starting in October with their first victory on the 7th, 21-16 over the Chicago Bears in Tulane Stadium. However, this game is much more remembered for one of the more famous bloopers in NFL Follies history.
Saints have the ball at the Bears' 1-yard line, trying to get in. Manning tries to sneak it. He has the ball knocked loose. Jess Phillips tries to fall on it. It's rolling backwards away from the line. Len Garrett tries to fall on it. He can't get it. Bob Newland can't. Carl Johnson tries to fall on it. And the Bears have recovered the fumble near their own 35. Looks like they'll spot it at about the 32. Bob Pifferini recovers the fumble for the Chicago Bears. What an incredible fumble that was, to say the least.
Then on October 28th versus the Redskins, the Saints defense has 5 sacks, and new kicker Bill McClard makes 4 field goals for a 19-3 victory. On November 4th, the Saints recorded their first ever victorious shutout, 13-0 over Buffalo, and held running back O.J. Simpson to 79 yards rushing, en route to a then NFL record 2,003 yards in a season. After a promising 4-4 mark after 8 games, the Saints slipped through their last 6 games and finished the year 5-9. 1974 was the second straight year the Saints finished the season 5-9. Their defense, known as the Crunch Bunch, was second in the NFC in sacks with 37. Their 14-13 win over Atlanta on September 29th ended an 18-game road losing streak. They closed out their very last game at Tulane Stadium with a 14-0 win over the Cardinals on December 8th, with rookie Alvin Maxson rushing for over 140 yards. Maxson led the team in rushing, Bob Newland in receiving yards, Howard Stevens in return yards, Joe Owens in sacks, and for interceptions a tie at 4 between Ernie Jackson and Terry Schmidt. One of the more interesting moments of the season occurred October 27th in a win at home against Philadelphia. The Tulane Stadium crowd got so angry over a pass interference call against the Saints, a resulting 22-minute boo occurred that was so loud the officials actually halted play for that length of time. The crowd would eventually quiet down after the officials called 2 unsportsmanlike penalties against the Saints because of the home field noise. While it's easy to remember the booing from that contest, it's sometimes easy to forget that the Saints had to come back late to win the game.
1:03 up on the clock. Manning breaks the huddle, getting ready. This is going to be an exciting time here for the folks at Tulane Stadium. There's the snap. Manning pitches back to Phillips. Phillips runs to the left. Got a block from Beasley, and he's in for the touchdown. Jess Phillips takes it in from 3 yards out, gives the Saints the lead, and I don't think the Eagles are going to overcome.
And now it's time for another Saints timeout. This time we detour to look back at Super Bowl IX. On January 12, 1975, Super Bowl IX was played at Tulane Stadium, though it was originally scheduled for the Superdome, but delays in construction prevented it from being used. Head coach Bud Grant's Minnesota Vikings faced off against Chuck Noll's Pittsburgh Steelers. Each team had 10 regular season wins. The first half was a true defensive battle, with the only score coming on a safety.
A safety, and Pittsburgh has scored. Got away from Targeton. Greenwood was putting the heat on, and it's a safety. And our first score is a safety, fittingly, in a defensive struggle.
The Vikings tried to come back near the end of the first half until...
Straight out of the bottom. It's intercepted by Malplug. The ball popped high in the air in the end zone.
For Islade O'Gilliam going across the middle.
It's the safety man, Glenn Edwards, always coming. That is a pop.
Edwards, a good pop. It bounced up in the air. Mel Blunt's 47 over there. He's watched it come through.
At times, it was a turnover-filled contest, largely due to wet field conditions from earlier rains, in addition to the age of the AstroTurf. The second half witnessed the Steelers recovering a fumble on the opening kickoff.
And it is fumbled by McCullum and just saved. Let's see who's got it. It's Marv Kellum. Kellum recovers.
Look at his foot slip. That's the soccer style, and this field has been slick. That ball was not kicked the way he was trying to kick it.
Correct that. Brown fumbled the ball, and Marv Kellum recovered.
Then later scored on a Franco Harris 9-yard run.
Look at that opening over there. Running to the flag. Pittsburgh scores. Jerry Mullins threw the block for him.
Boy, did he throw a block there. You call it right on the bunt.
The Vikings would score a touchdown on a block punt in the fourth quarter.
Look out. Terry Brown recovered it. Matt Blair blocked the punt, and it's recovered in the end zone by Terry Brown.
But the Steelers would later put the game out of reach on a 66-yard drive.
3:40 to go. There's a rollout. Bradshaw fires. Touchdown. Terry Brown, the tight end. Bradshaw to Brown. A 66-yard drive by the Steelers, who surged right back.
From the Brown level, you're going to see a great move, I think, by Bradshaw. He put the pressure on him on the outside. Rolled out. Here he goes. He has the option of running and throwing. Cobb falls down, which could be a handicap to him. You see Steven running over. Bradshaw stops and drills this thing right in the middle of Brown. He found his opening back in the middle there. Strauss is too late.
Harris would be named game MVP and set a then Super Bowl record 158 rushing yards, while the entire Viking squad was held to 17 rushing yards. The 1975 Saints' only real highlight of the season was moving into the Superdome, where 72,000-plus fans filled the seats for the club's first ever preseason game versus the Oilers in a 13-7 loss. The Superdome was way over budget, with its official final building cost $162 million. The original projection was $46.7 million. It's estimated some $50 million of that 162 figure was money that the state spent on lawsuits from individuals who were fighting the dome being built in the first place, in addition to interest rates on construction projects at the time being an astronomical 22% a year. Another reason why the dome expenses went up: when the state legislature was allocating money for the project, they actually forgot to put in dollars for, believe it or not, seats. John North would only coach the Saints for the first 6 regular season games that year. He would be fired after a loss to the Rams on October 26. His only win in that stretch was on October 12th. It was over the Green Bay Packers.
Well, here we go. The Saints with their first opportunity to win a home game in the regular season in the Louisiana Superdome. A 20-yard field goal attempt by Rick Zorro. There's the snap from Hill, the placement, the kick is up, and it's good, and this game is over. Once again, you can hear it in the crowd. The New Orleans Saints have won their first regular season game in the Superdome.
What are some of Coach North's memories about New Orleans?
But we were fortunate that year. We won 5, I think, and lost 9 or something like that. Well, I know what it was. But anyway, we felt like we had a good start, and then the next year, of course, we had the strike, and that set us back, and one thing after another. Next year, we had the flood at Thibodeau, and we didn't have it up. But that's no excuses. I had an opportunity, and we just didn't get it done, and that's part of the business. The name of the game is to win, and we didn't.
The other game the Saints won that season just happened to be the first for interim head coach Ernie Hefferly. November the 2nd in the Superdome over the Falcons, 23-7. Story goes in the locker room before the game that Coach Hefferly gave a very rousing Newt Rockne-type speech to the team. Here's Ernie Hefferly talking about a potential follow-up to that first speech.
The next week, Coach says, Ernie, give that speech you gave last week. I says, it's up to you guys to get them ready. I can't be doing this every weekend. So that was the end of that.
Mike Strawn would lead the team in rushing yardage for the season, Alvin Maxson in receiving yards, even though he was playing out of the running back position, and Tommy Myers led the team with 5 interceptions. And now it's time to take another Saints timeout. On January 26, 1976, the AFC-NFC Pro Bowl was played in the Superdome with Billy White Shoes Johnson named game MVP. The NFC won 23-20 thanks to a touchdown pass from Mike Barella to the Cardinals' Mel Gray with 1:09 left in the game. The 1976 Saints started anew with King Henry Hangstram taking over as head coach. Hangstram had been well known for being the Super Bowl winning coach in the 1969 regular season with the Kansas City Chiefs, and in a 15-year career there had several division titles as well. Some of his football innovations include stacked defense, where 3 to 7 men would line up on the line of scrimmage, and any number of them would try to rush the passer or back off into coverage. He also created the moving pocket designed to help give the quarterback more time before throwing the football.
Playing in New Orleans like we have in the past, why I sincerely felt that it was really had the potential to be one of the great franchises in the National Football League. As a result, we're going to do everything we possibly can to fulfill a commitment that we're going to make. It would be silly for him to make any kind of a timetable to you as to how soon we'll be able to accomplish what we want to accomplish. But the only thing I can promise is that we're going to spend every available moment building and thinking and scheming and whatever we have to do to make this the kind of a franchise that I think it deserves to be.
And led the team to a 4-10 record. He drafted Chuck Muncie and Tony Galbraith in the first 2 rounds of the draft. And those 2 top running backs proved their worth on September 26 of 76, ironically, when Hank Stram had to go back to Kansas City to face his old team, the Chiefs. It was the first time in Saints history that 2 individual running backs had a minimum of 100 yards rushing apiece. In this case, Tony Galbraith 146, Chuck Muncie 126, in a 27-17 victory over those Chiefs. In fact, near the very end of the game, Hank Stram had quarterback Bobby Scott run up the score by throwing a touchdown pass to tight end Henry Childs. But even before the 76 season began, Hank Stram knew that he may have some difficulties being Saints head coach. He told a story one day that before the 1976 college draft, he was trying to make trades to get John Riggins, fullback from the New York Jets, and Freddie Dreyer, defensive end from the Rams. Then he noticed a note on his desk that said, as of this moment, all trade negotiations are off, signed John Meekum. When Stram called John Meekum to ask about the note, Meekum swears he doesn't know anything about it. A couple hours later, Meekum calls back Stram and tells him that one of Meekum's personal assistants signed that note without permission. Meekum went on to state because he knew that personal assistant for years and felt that he meant well, they were going to go ahead and cancel the trade negotiations, to which Hank Stram replied, well, who's running this asylum anyway? Another issue Hank Stram had to put up with was John Meekum elected to keep Dick Gorton in the front office. While it was in Hank Stram's contract that he had the right to hire and fire anyone in the football side of the organization. For all intents and purposes, Gordon would stay out of Hank Stram's way and then would be let go after the 76 season over what John Meekum considered budget cuts. Archie Manning wouldn't play in 1976, though he was on the active roster early on in the season due to complications following shoulder surgery. They went on to shut out Atlanta 30-0 on October 10th, plus Maurice Spencer set an NFL record by recovering 3 opponents' fumbles in one game, and even won 2 games in a row in November over Detroit and Seattle. The 1977 Saints turned out to be a season of disappointment. Hank Stram's team finished the year 3-11. Archie Manning returned to quarterback and played in all or part of 10 games that year. The only 3 wins were at Chicago, 42-24 on October 2nd, in which the Saints scored 2 defensive touchdowns.
As Avellini takes the deep drop, here's the big rush, free football. This might go the distance. Bob Pollard with the lineman's dream. Alex Price was the man who came in, hit Avellini, and knocked him free. Jim Merlo picks it up. He returned 2 for touchdowns last year. He's going to get his first this year. Guys closing in on him, but Merlo goes into the end zone for a touchdown. Caught by Walter Payton, but the impetus of Payton hurdled himself and Jim Merlo into the end zone.
October the 30th versus the Rams, 27-26, partially thanks to a fake field goal.
For Riggs Auer, remember, he made a 23-yard field goal, and he missed one from the 50. And
And look out, it's Blanchard passing in the end zone. Roy's through. Oh, what a play. Where did that one come from? I don't know. I never saw Lois Crooms make no catch before. All the time a defensive end, and he's in there on the offense to catch a touchdown.
And November 20th versus the Falcons by the score of 21-20, thanks to a near-game-ending touchdown.
Archie Manning on 2nd and 15. He's got protection. Throwing. Childs. Touchdown. Henry Childs. That's his 7th touchdown catch of the year. And Hank Stram is up and jumping on Archie Manning.
On November 13th, Rich Zorro had a chance to put the Saints in the lead with under 2 minutes to go, but his field goal attempt hit an upright. As a result, the game went to overtime, in which the 49ers won 10-7. 2 weeks later, on November 27th, the Saints at the 49ers in a back-and-forth contest, which was decided on the last play of the game on a Ray Wersching 49ers field goal, and the 49ers won 20-17. Most fans likely remember December 11th, when the Saints lost to Tampa Bay 33-14, giving the Buccaneers their first ever win after losing 26 straight games. The contest featured Tampa Bay running back 3 interceptions for touchdowns. Chuck Muncie would lead the team with 811 rushing yards. Tony Galbraith led in receiving with 41 catches. However, Henry Childs would lead in yardage with 518, and Chuck Crisp would lead in the interception category with 4. Almost a month after the 1977 season ended, John Mecom decided to let go Hank Stram. However, Mecom didn't tell Stram directly he was fired. Instead, he asked front office personnel Eddie Jones and Harry Holmes to tell Hank Stram on his behalf, a practice that members of the media have stated was very common most of the time with John Mecom. Stram's firing did anger a lot of fans and also angered ABC's Howard Cosell, who stated at a public appearance that the one who should be fired from the Saints is John Mecom, to which Cosell further stated that with all the front office changes that have occurred since the New Orleans Saints had been established as a franchise, that maybe the one doing the firing is the one who should be let go, to which the Saints had to turn another page in their history. And now it's time for another Saints timeout. On January 15, 1978, some 76,400 fans packed the Louisiana Superdome for Super Bowl XII as the Denver Broncos, led by head coach Red Miller, took on Tom Landry's Dallas Cowboys. This also marked the first time the big game was played indoors and the first time most of the game was played in prime time. This also marked the first and only time the Super Bowl MVP was given to 2 players in the same game, Dallas's defensive tackle Randy White and defensive end Harvey Martin. Dallas's doomsday defense forced 8 turnovers and eventually forced Broncos quarterback Craig Morton, a one-time Cowboy, to the bench in return for Chalmette, Louisiana native Norris Weiss.
Tony Dorsett puts the Cowboys on the board. He's only the 6th touchdown rushing against the Denver defense this year, and it came after a turnover, the INT. He's a mean motor scooter, I'll tell you that.
Deep for Haven Moses. Picked off by Benny Barnes at the 40, the 3rd Dallas interception. Intercepted number 4. This is Mark Washington. Going deep. Oh, what a catch! It is a touchdown. Lewis Johnson. What an effort! A 45-yard touchdown shot from Staubach.
The ball is thrown beyond Butch Johnson. He only has to have possession over the goal line.
That ranks right up there with the ones that Lynn Swan made 2 years ago. Morton on the sideline looks on. Norris Weiss remains the quarterback. 1st and goal at about the half-yard line. Rob Lytle and Jim Jensen behind Weiss. Touchdown, Denver.
Here's the touchdown. Jensen leading in. Maurer takes Harvey Martin inside.
And Rob Lytle burrowed into the end zone. Back to Newhouse. Option pass. Deep for Golden Richards. Touchdown, Dallas. Steve Foley wasn't ready. 30-yard touchdown pass.
Dallas defensive back Randy Hughes set a then Super Bowl record with 2 fumble recoveries in the game, in addition to having an interception. Plus, Robert Newhouse became the first running back to throw a TD pass in the big game. Another trivia note, this game marked the first Super Bowl where someone other than the referee tossed the opening coin flip. Here it was Hall of Fame legend Red Grange. The Saints didn't have to look far to hire a new head coach. On February the 6th of 78, Dick Nolan was promoted to head coach after being hired a year earlier as linebackers coach under Hank Stram. Nolan had previously worked with the San Francisco 49ers as their head coach from 68 to 75, where he won 3 straight division titles from 70 to 72. Here's Dick Nolan addressing some fans in August of 78, followed by a sit-down interview.
This is a time when 28 coaches are promising their fans the world. Championships don't just happen, they're built. I'm not going to promise anyone where we will end up in the win-loss column. That is often such an empty promise. I just want to leave it at this. When we walk off the field from our last game in the 1978 season, I honestly believe you will be proud of this Saints team here today.
I told John Meekin that first year we'd have the best record he ever had, which we did. We were 7-9, and then the next year I told him we'd be better than we were, and we were. We were 8-8. And then the third year, he just brought in a lot of people we didn't need.
However, the Saints made an interesting decision after firing Stram, but before hiring Nolan. On January 31st of 78, they elected to trade away defensive tackle Bob Pollard and guard Terry Steve to the St. Louis Cardinals in return for guard Conrad Dobler and wide receiver Ike Harris. On the same day Dick Nolan was hired, longtime front office men Eddie Jones and Harry Holmes were promoted to executive vice presidents. Going into the season, Dick Nolan drafted Wes Chandler, a wide receiver out of the University of Florida, with the Saints' first-round pick, a move which greatly assisted one of the more memorable offenses in club history. Nolan created the flex defense, where 4 defensive linemen line up slightly away from the line of scrimmage in order to help stop the run better. In return, good cover cornerbacks would be needed to help cover the pass. The Saints finished 1978 with their best ever record at the time of 7-9. The Saints won their second ever opening day game by defeating the Vikings 31-24, with Tommy Myers getting 3 interceptions. Some of the more interesting games that year included September 24th at the Cincinnati Bengals, where Saints kicker John Leopold, one of 4 kickers the Saints had that year, made a 27-yard field goal on the last play of the game that hit an upright and bounced through to make the final score Saints 20, Cincinnati 18. This season also marked the first time New Orleans beat the 49ers twice in the same season. After winning 3 games in a row in October, the calendar turned to November, and unfortunately so did the Saints' fortunes. On November 5th, they played at the Pittsburgh Steelers, but with 1:51 left, Steelers quarterback Terry Bradshaw throws the winning 24-yard touchdown pass to Rocky Bleier to seal that game 20-14. The next week, the Saints are at home against the Atlanta Falcons. It was the first time a Superdome regular season game for the Saints had sold out, though not in time to lift the local blackout. Late in the contest, the Saints had the ball 4th down and 2 just past the midfield stripe. The Saints elected to go for it and didn't quite get enough yards for the first down. As a result, the Falcons would get the ball back and on first down would make a memorable play.
They've got 19 seconds, 1st and 10 on their own 43. The Falcons with no timeouts remaining, and you can bet Bartkowski's going to do what he's done about 10 times today, crank back and throw it as far as he can down the right sideline. That's exactly what he's doing. He's throwing a deep one, deep. It's deflected, and it's caught. Touchdown, Falcons on a deflected pass. I can't believe it. Jackson, the rookie from Texas, caught the deflected pass and ran into the end zone. 10 seconds remaining, and the Falcons have pulled this one right out, and it's an amazing turn of events, almost unbelievable.
And then 2 weeks later, the rematch at Atlanta. Near game's end, Steve Bartkowski throws a pass into the end zone, which is intercepted by Ralph McGill of the Saints. However, an official on the play ruled that Maurice Spencer interfered with the offensive receiver. Later, the National Football League told owner John Meekum that the flag should not have been thrown. But as a result, Atlanta gets the ball on the 1-yard line, and on that last play, Jim Mitchell catches a 1-yard touchdown catch for once again to give the Falcons a win, 20-17. Overall, it was a better season for the Saints, but a lot of work was still needed down the road. The 1979 Saints wound up finishing with the then best ever club record at 8-8. The offense had over 5,600 total yards, and the offensive line set a club record for lowest number of sacks allowed at 17. The defense, running head coach Dick Nolan's flex formation, still struggled at times with the concept. However, the defense did set a team record that year with 46 sacks. The regular season would start on September 2nd at home against the Atlanta Falcons, the first time the Saints sold out the Superdome for a regular season game, and did so in time for the Metro blackout to be lifted. A back-and-forth high-scoring contest that wound up in overtime. It would be in the extra period special team snapper John Watson would make a critical mistake.
Goes over the head of Erxleben. Erxleben picks it up and tries to throw it. It's intercepted, and it's taken in for a touchdown. Unbelievable.
The interception was caught by Falcons' James Mayberry. Final score, Atlanta 40, New Orleans 34. 2 more losses would follow, and then a team meeting was held. An agreement was made to try to change things up on both offense and a little bit on defense. And as a result, the Saints would wind up winning 7 of their next 10 games, including October 14th at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Saints would win 42-14 After a scoreless first half, the Saints scored 6 touchdowns on consecutive drives to set a team record. Then on October 21st, the home game against the Detroit Lions, the Saints would win 17-7. All 4 starting defensive backs, Eric Felton, Ray Brown, Clarence Chapman, and Tommy Myers, would each have an interception. Myers' interception would be run back for a touchdown.
That was going to be Tommy Myers, the foot races on. Tommy Myers, who already this year has 3 interceptions, picked off his 4th. He took it in.
And then October 28th at the Washington Redskins, the Saints would win 14-10, largely thanks to the defense holding the Redskins from scoring on 17 different goal-to-goal situations. In addition, with under 2 minutes to go, Saints defensive end Aloysius Grooms would sack quarterback Joe Theismann on 4th down to allow the offense to run out the clock and win the game. After this win, the Saints were all alone in first place of the NFC West for their first time ever. The excitement Saints fans were feeling at the time was greatly summarized by a quote used by Wayne Mack, Saints play-by-play radio man from 1976 to 81, following a Saints win.
Okay, they'll be dancing on the tables at Pat O'Brien tonight. They'll be dancing on the tables at Pat O'Brien tonight.
After 13 regular season games, the Saints were tied with the Rams for the division lead, and because of a close wild card race that year, the Saints would almost have to win the division to get into the postseason. Game 14 would be the swing point, December 3rd, Monday Night Football against the Oakland Raiders in New Orleans. The Saints would build a 35-14 lead midway through the third quarter.
Manning wide open over the middle. Oh, we told you Galbraith was a receiver. Oh, a truly great catch. This is why we talked about Galbraith's ability as a receiver. It is super. That is unbelievable. He even turned in the air and right back with the right hand and got it. Manning crossing his back. Going for Childs. Touchdown. Henry Childs. Marvelous catch. David was way out. Did it. Picked off. Borderline. Touchdown New Orleans. Ken Borderline, who played his collegiate football here at LSU. Second interception this season, and it puts the Saints up another touchdown.
But it wasn't enough to seal the game as Raiders quarterback Ken Stabler came back to throw 4 second-half touchdown passes and seal the win 42-35.
Complete. Left branch and one move. Goodbye. Goodbye. There are no flags down. Is that wild? That happened fast. Stabler. Left branch touchdown. Left branch was spectacular in the determining factor for Oakland here in the second half.
It was during this Raiders game that Chuck Muncie became the first Saints running back ever to rush for at least 1,000 yards in a season, in this case 1,198 at season's end. The Saints won their last game of the year 29-14 over the Super Bowl-bound Rams. 5 Saints that season wound up going to the Pro Bowl. Quarterback Archie Manning, safety Tommy Myers, tight end Henry Childs, receiver Wes Chandler, and running back Chuck Muncie, who was named Pro Bowl MVP. And now we'd like to close out this section with looking back at who we consider the better players by position for the Saints in the 1970s. Quarterback Archie Manning, running backs Chuck Muncie and Tony Galbraith, fullback Jack Holmes, wide receivers Wes Chandler and Bob Newland, tight end Henry Childs, offensive tackles Don Morrison and J.T. Taylor, guards Emmanuel Zanders and Conrad Dobler, center John Hill, defensive ends Joe Owens and Aloysius Grooms, defensive tackles Bob Pollard and Derlin Moore, linebackers Jim Merlo, Joe Fettersfield, Pat Hughes, and Wayne Coleman, cornerbacks Ernie Jackson and Vivian Lee, safeties Tom Myers and Chuck Christ, kicker Garo Yepremian, punter Tom Blanchard, return specialist Howard Stevens, special teams coverage Rich Maudie, deep snapper John Hill, and holder Tom Blanchard. The 1980 Saints season, or some call it the Baghead season, started December 20th, 1979, when John Mecum announced that Steve Rosenblum would be the new general manager. Rosenblum had a falling out with his stepmother, Georgia Frontiere, over ownership of the LA Rams, which for years was owned by Rosenblum's father, Carroll, who had passed away earlier in 1979. He in turn hired Dick Steinberg to oversee personnel, and the Saints that following April in the college draft picked 2 of the better players of all time, offensive tackle Stan Brock in the first round, cornerback Dave Waymer in the second round. However, there were some issues in the front office between Rosenblum and Dick Nolan, and this infighting would gradually work its way down to the players, resulting in what would turn out to be a 1-15 season. Heading into the 1980 campaign, Rosenblum traded away Conrad Dobler to the Buffalo Bills. Some felt this had to do with some personal issues that Rosenblum may have had when he was with the Rams and Dobler was with the Cardinals. Also, when Tony Galbraith held out of training camp, feeling he deserved a better contract, Rosenblum wouldn't even talk to him. Galbraith would finally arrive at camp, but not until the last week it was in session. The main change to the Saints defense, run situations, they would go with Oklahoma defense, but stick with the flex defense and what they felt were passing situations. The regular season opener was a back-and-forth contest with the 49ers, and it came down to the last play of the game, when Saints kicker Russell Erxleben missed a 34-yard field goal that would have tied the contest, and as a result, the Saints lost 26-23. 3 weeks later in Miami, the game that likely did end the team emotionally, Saints were down 21-16 with about 30 seconds left. When on fourth down, Miami tries to punt from the midfield stripe.
He is going to kick it. He has it blocked. They blocked it. New Orleans has the ball.
Monty does a great job of blocking the kick. The Saints have possession on the 10-yard line. 6 seconds left in the game.
Manning throwing, there. Touchdown! Touchdown. The flag is down.
They're calling pass interference on the New Orleans
pass
Saints.
Interference call. Saints scored on everybody thought was the last play of the game to pull out an unbelievable victory, but offensive pass interference is called against New Orleans.
A couple days later, the NFL front office calls owner John Meekum to let him know the flag should not have been thrown. During the second half of the Miami game, Chuck Muncie was pulled from action. Apparently, a trade had been finalized during the game that would send him to the San Diego Chargers in return for a second-round draft choice in 1981. For the record, the Saints would use that draft choice to pick Ricky Jackson. Dick Nolan would end up getting fired after Game 12, which was on Monday Night Football against the Rams in the Dome, 27-7. A day after, Dick Stanfel, offensive line coach, was named interim head coach.
Do our best, and I think the fellas are ready, and they worked hard all week. It was a disappointment last week, but I think that thinking about this game, we're looking forward to a win.
Stanfel meant business. He released defensive end Don Reese over starting a fight with teammates. He threw out the flex defense, and then the Saints got back to business. Those last 4 games of the season, the Saints were much more competitive. November 30th at home against the Vikings, the Saints were down 20-0 at one point. Near game's end, the score was 23-20 Minnesota. The Saints were about to take a lead when Archie Manning rolls left for a touchdown. However, Tony Galbraith was called for illegal motion. So on the next play with time running out, Benny Ricardo came out to attempt a field goal, which ends up getting blocked. The next week, December 7th, was at the San Francisco 49ers. Saints take a 35-7 lead at halftime, and then quarterback Joe Montana for San Francisco would lead what was then the greatest comeback in NFL history by scoring 4 touchdowns unanswered in the second half that would bring the game to overtime, and the 49ers would kick the winning field goal 38-35.
It'll be a 36-yard attempt, and the crowd will tell you. It's perfect, and the San Francisco 49ers have won in overtime. Crooms, number 78, for the New Orleans Saints. He just cannot believe it.
A week after that, December 14th at the New York Jets would be the Saints' only win of the season, 21-20. A very competitive contest. Near the end, Russell Erxleben nails a 57-yard punt into the wind and snow to get the Jets well out of field goal range and clinch the contest. Here's Manning after the game, interviewed by CBS.
Archie, this is Kurt Gowdy. I'm going to let your old coach talk to you, Hank Straff. Archie, this got to mean an awful lot to all of you. It was a great effort, nice going.
Well, thank you, Coach. It means an awful lot. You know what's been in the back of everybody's minds as the season grew on, that we were going to go through this thing without winning a football game. So we've come very close the last 2 weeks, a couple of times earlier in the year, but especially the last 2 weeks. And to finally get one today, it's just one, but it's a real good one for us. I'm glad we got it. We could have folded it up as we have many times late, but I'm glad we won the game.
Well, congratulations, Archie, and it's a great win for everybody. I know everybody in New Orleans and the Louisiana area are very proud, and Mississippi.
And then it was time to rebuild the organization in a totally new direction.